All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're continuing our ID Pro track. The next presenter, which I would like to introduce, is Nathan from CVS. So please come on stage. And he's going to talk about very important things. Yeah. Okay. 5 minutes early? Yeah. It said 9:20. No? It said 9:20. I'm in right time, no? I think I am. All right. We're going to talk about past, present, and the future. Thank you very much. Nathan.
Yeah, if we were starting 5 minutes early, I could have put the past part in the past when the start of the session happened, for those of you that understand time stuff. I'm not actually here today to talk about good stuff and cool stuff that I'm involved in. I'm actually here today to talk about good stuff and cool stuff that you're all involved in. This is very much a cheerleader session, and I'm not particularly attractive as a cheerleader, but my job is to help you all reinforce a certain amount of pride in what we have done in the identity industry, in what we can do now. And then I do have one challenge. I have several action items, several options, several methods that can be used to implement that one challenge. One challenge I think it's time for us to bite off that, by and large, while there may be some exceptions, we have not bought off yet. So let's start with going way back. And I notice this is kind of a theme. A lot of the different presentations, including a couple of the keynotes, started off way back. So I'm going to do my own little bit of way back here. We don't need to go through the agenda. This is my agenda. Very simple. And you'll notice the word here is we. Good stuff we've done, good stuff we're doing, good stuff we still need to do. And the we here is not CVS Health, although we're doing some good stuff at CVS Health. The we here is, as was the term that was used in the very, very first keynote on Wednesday morning, the identirati. Do you guys like that? I don't know. I still have mixed feelings about that. There's a little bit of kind of an ominous kind of sense to that for me. But good stuff we've done, good stuff we're doing, good stuff that we still need to do, which is only going to be one thing, but with multiple methods that we can talk about. And the first part of this is going to be interactive. I need you guys to be open and transparent with the rest of the team here. How long has enterprise identity practice been practiced? It's been a lot longer than when the term identity was created, right? We created that word identity and identity and access management kind of in the middle of how long the discipline of identity and access management has been practiced. We've been delivering real business value using identity management techniques since before the term existed. Hey, some of you are really, really awake. That's fantastic. In fact, first there were mainframes. How many of us worked starting in the mainframe era? Okay, good. I'm far from the only one. What did we identity geeks do during the mainframe years? Well, we said we can improve on this. Because what were the mainframe software engineers doing? They were busy doing what software engineers are always doing. They were busy deploying their apps with standalone security. And we said, hey, wait a second. We can do this better. So we created and implemented mainframe access control systems, which, how many of your companies are still using a mainframe access control system? Okay. How many of you have implemented or developed a mainframe access control system? Okay. Do we still get value from this stuff that was done 30 years ago? Yes. Yes, absolutely. This is something we did from way before identity management was even a concept that is still delivering business value. Now, we at CVS have a few too many mainframe access control systems, but that's another topic. Then compute got distributed. What did we do in the distributed compute era? We said, we got to manage all this stuff, including the identities of people. So here comes network directory services, the first of which was not, of course, LDAP. LDAP was happening at the same time, but how many of you implemented Novell NetWare? Network directory services, anybody? Yep. I don't even need to ask how many of you are still involved in some way, shape, or form in managing and supporting network directory services. We all have them. They are an essential part of operating any sort of business. Forget about identity business. They're an essential part of operating business now. That's how much value network directory services provide. We did that, and we're still doing that. Then business began moving to the internet. And the app developers were busy doing what do the app developers do? Standalone app security. And we said, we got to figure out how to get the right folks access to this stuff. So we, the identity industry, created and deployed web access management systems. Same question. How many of you have deployed and are still supporting web access management systems? And I know this is, those of you who aren't raising your hands are just refusing to cooperate. I get it. Or you're busy actually supporting these systems while you're pretending to be at a conference. I did that too a little bit during the conference. How many of you would say you still get business value from your web access management system? Do you support today? Us too. Absolutely. This is old stuff. But it's yet another example of business value we, the identity industry, have delivered over the years. Managing all of these at enterprise scale was slow. We figured that out. How long did it take you to get your workforce the access they need? How long does it still and sometimes take you to get your workforce the access they need? So we said we can do better than that and enter access provisioning systems. This was, by the way, this is still a long time ago. The first access provisioning systems were late 90s. Yeah, this is 20 years ago still. For some of us, it probably seems like it was yesterday. And I will acknowledge that the access provisioning area has been a challenge more than some of the other ones. How many of you would say you're done with access provisioning automation? Anyone? Anyone done with access provisioning automation for your company? Yeah, we're not either. Our businesses need to collaborate with other organizations outside our networks. So we said we can enable that. Enter Identity Federation. How many of you deploy, support, or have created Identity Federation systems? How many of your companies, keep your hands up, if you would say your company is still getting business value from that system? Same point. You see the point I'm getting here? We do stuff in the identity industry that isn't just about, no, you can't do that. It's about the business needs X. We can do Y to enable that. And we've done it over and over and over again. Starting to get a little more modern, some clever people started making machines smarter. So what did we in the identity industry say? Hey, we can use smarter machines. Enter all of our adaptive authentication stuff, user behavior analytics, and access analytics. Now, the latest entry to this, and probably the slowest to develop, has been the access analytics. But same question, and I expect there'll be a few fewer hands on this, but how many of you have already started down the path of implementing AI machine learning-based systems for identity in your organizations? Yeah, started is all I asked for on that, because there's no way you're finished with this yet, right? This is still very much in its infancy. But still good, right? We had probably 2-3 dozen hands on that. So this is our past. We have done a lot of, I gotta figure out if this is counting down or up. It's counting down. Okay, good. We're on track. We've done a lot of really valuable things for our enterprises over the history of identity management, which, as I said, expands way back before we even called it identity management. So where are we at now? What can we do with it now? We're in a position to deliver, I would say, very significant value to the businesses that we work for. And this is true whether you're a vendor or you work in an enterprise like I and my team do. The capabilities that we have right now can speak directly to real business need. Now, in order to do that well, how many of you have an enterprise architecture background in here? I want to know if I need to avoid this topic. No, it's all right. We got enough of you. Okay. Identity and access management in an enterprise, unless, okay, one more question. How many of you are large enterprise, 5,000 or more workforce? Oh, good grief. Where are our small business people in here? Small corporation people in here. Okay. If you're in a large enterprise, I hope this isn't a controversial statement. Identity management is not a system in a large enterprise. It better not be if you want it to be successful. It's not a system. It's what enterprise architects call a system of systems, right? So what sort of a system of systems can we implement using currently available technologies? This is where I'm actually going to open things up to be interactive right in the middle of the presentation. I don't want to wait for the end. So this is a sample, one-page identity and access management architecture for a large enterprise. There's a couple features that I want to pull out. You guys can, if you like it, you can reuse it. If you like it sort of and want to tweak it, that means you're an architect, reuse it. If you don't like it at all, that probably means you're an app developer. I'm sorry. But a couple features on here. Number one, can we now do microservices for identity and access management? The answer is yes. Now, you got to be choosy about which vendors you work with if you want to get that, or you got to be willing to develop some of your own. There's a couple of boxes up here that I don't know of any vendors that deliver as a microservices architecture yet. But by and large, we can deliver every single box on here as a microservice, and a lot of them are now containerized. So we can go full agile DevOps for deploying this stuff if we want to, if we choose to, and that's certainly our strategy at CVS Health. A couple other things that we think are really important. If you look starting from the top right, this doesn't have a laser pointer, does it? Even if it did, I wouldn't know which screen to point at. If you look starting from the top right, those are your identity data flows. And I don't know about you, but our opinion is that access data is not identity data. What I can access is not part of who I am as a person. You may like defining your workforce that way. We don't define our workforce that way. So identity data flows top right, flowing into the system, all the way through over to the left where users use the access. The bottom part of the flow is more focused on what we call entitlements or access, both entitlement policies and entitlement events. I cannot, because of corporate policy, put our vendor names on there, but I'm glad to talk with anyone who wants to about what vendors and tech we like in these spaces. I'm not at all glad to talk about what vendors and tech we actually use. Hint, everything in here that says your tech is one box, it may not look quite like just one box in our current state. Especially given, as many of you know, CVS Health just acquired Aetna. So one large company acquiring another large company, and so we've got a fair bit of technology diversity here. But the key point here is, with an architecture like this, we can deliver the access our enterprise needs. We can manage it relatively effectively. We have the intelligence and analytics built in to be able to react quickly. And one thing that's not on here, didn't identify anything that's cloud or not, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, shouldn't matter. If you design it right, doesn't matter where your endpoints are, doesn't matter where your apps are. And for us, that's a true statement. It works cloud or on-prem either way. So this is cool stuff we can do. And I'm going to go on to a challenge for all of us about one cool thing I think it's time for us to get onto, and several methods that I think would apply to that. But before we do that, I'm glad to take any questions anyone has on this fun. And that, at the end is fine too. It's totally fine. But okay, we want to move on. No problem. So good stuff that we still need to do. She's better at looking excited than I am. There is one thing that it is time, in my opinion, for us to do. And we have the methodologies available to us to make some real progress on it. And what it is if this thing, I guess it doesn't work if your finger's on, your hand is over the antenna. We have the capabilities to lead our organizations now to stop treating our workforce like they're less important than our customers. Does this resonate with anyone? Yeah. Anyone here? Yeah. I believe we need to start delivering, and we have taken this on at CVS Health, we need to start delivering, and this is a big challenge, and it freaked out our entire IM department the first time I said this. They're like, can we really get that far? We need to deliver a delightful user experience for our workforce. Why would we do that? Well, first off, other than the fact that we're humans too, do we need another reason other than the fact that we're humans as well? If we do, the other reason is because I believe, I am convinced that we now have the actual capability to do this. I'm not going to go into examples of not delightful user experience for workforce and enterprise identity. You all know it. You've all seen it. Although one of them was earlier, the how long does it take to get all the access you need thing. That would be a not delightful user experience. But if you decide that this is worth your time and attention as an identity leader in your own company, what can we do about it? If you buy in that we should be treating our workforce members as well from an identity experience as our consumers, what are some things we can do to get there? The first one that we believe heavily in and are investing in is that last part, the third part of applying smart machines to identity. The first part was adaptive authentication. A lot of us work on adaptive authentication. That's great. We're going to get to that in a second. The second part was user entity behavior analytics, UEBA. The third part was access analytics. We absolutely have the techniques available today, and there are a number of vendors who are working actively to evolve their skills in this space that you can find, some of whom are here, although I think the show floor is closed today. But I'm sure they would probably allow you to call them after the conference if you chose to, that are working on access analytics. And with the application of access analytics, we can make a lot better progress on this to get people all the access they need when they start in any of our organizations, and frankly, when they change jobs within any of our organizations. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get to 100% 2 weeks after we deploy an access analytics solution, right? I'm not saying that. But I am saying that there's a whole bunch of access that a lot of our IAM teams have been working to automate, the stuff we call birthright access, that with huge effort, most of us have gotten to 10%, 15%, maybe if you're really forward-leaning, 25% of that that's birthright, and the rest of it has to be requested after the fact, right? Our experience and the stuff we've been piloting and working on over the years would say that with the right application of the analytics capabilities in the IAM area, we can start pushing towards 50, 60% on this. I'm not going to say we can get to 100% yet. We can't, never will. Some people are just have weird jobs, right? But this is something we can do to substantially improve the experience of our users. How many of our customers would come to us and say, hey, I need access to buy something from you, and we would tell them, okay, we'll get that to you 4 days from now. We'll get back to you on that. We would not think about doing that to a customer. It's time to consider that just as completely unacceptable for our workforce. Second thing we could do, adaptive auth, right? Quick question, how many of you have deployed what you would consider to be a reasonably modern adaptive authentication capability for your customer populations? Anybody? And I know this is an enterprise identity thing, so the customer people are probably all over in another session right now, but a few. How many have deployed the same thing for your employee contingent worker population? A slightly smaller few. We need to roll this stuff out to our workforce. We need to get this stuff rolled out for our workforce. Passwordless is now really possible. We're on the FIDO2 bandwagon with, I hope, everybody else. It's right there. We're finally at the brink of being able to think about killing off passwords, even though we've been talking about it for 20 years. We need to get these things moving for our workforce. Oh, and during this interim period, where we still have passwords, periodic password reset is not a delightful user experience. And some of us don't even believe it's good security practice, right? A number of organizations here have come out publicly in the last few years about how this is actually harmful. We would strongly encourage anyone who has the courage to try to influence your auditors, because the auditors are the ones that hate it when you try to get rid of a control, right? We've done this. We're working on it as part of our merger between CVS and Aetna. I talked about that. Complete the rollout of adaptive authentication. And as part of actually managing the real risk here, the UEBA stuff really does help. The User Entity Behavior Analytics, sorry for the acronym for those that aren't familiar with it. It really does help here. And how it helps in the interim while we still have passwords is, when do we reset a password for a customer? We all know, when do we reset a password for a customer? When we have an indicator that their account has been compromised, we reset their password. Well, why don't we do that for our employees? And the answer is because historically it took way too long to figure out that an account had been compromised and the risk was too high. Now, waiting 45 days to reset the password isn't a good control around that. But with the UEBA stuff, we now have the capabilities to detect most compromised accounts. Certainly that's not perfect, but it reduces the risk to detect most compromised accounts within hours to minutes, right, of compromise, not days and days and days and weeks later. So that's an additive control that can help manage the risk of not doing forced periodic password reset, while we're trying to get everybody onto FIDO2 and adaptive authentication and get our workforce to a delightful sign-on experience. And what about those pain-in-the-butt developers? Can we do something, because they're people too. And I've been one. Can we get a delightful user experience for us, for the other IT folks? And the answer is yes, and this is where DevSecOps comes in. We need to complete that marriage of security with DevOps, and we need to apply that to IAM, and we have the capabilities to do this today. I mentioned earlier in the one-page architecture slide that a lot of the vendors you'll work with and a lot of your identity engineers will have the ability to deliver your identity services as microservices, very often containerized, and there are people in the industry. And as was talked about in the last session, if you don't have any, you can always train up one of your existing infrastructure engineers to do it, who would be glad to integrate your identity services with your infrastructure as code services, your CI/CD pipelines. And if I'm throwing jargon out there that you aren't familiar with, I apologize. I get too excited about this stuff. But continuous integration is up here. We need to apply the DevOps methodologies to our identity services. We need to do it now. We can do it now. And if we do that, we will be able to automate not just provisioning, but here's a new one. When you deploy a new environment in AWS, when you deploy a new environment on-prem, when you deploy a new environment in Azure, it doesn't matter. When is the right time to deploy the access controls and policies that go along with that environment? When you deploy the environment, right? That's what we call entitlement lifecycle management. You've got to get the groups, the roles, the policies in there to support the environment you're putting up. If we marry our identity services up with our puppets, chefs, cloud formations, Ansibles of the world, we can do this. This is stuff we can do now if we choose to do it. We are just about out of time, and that was my last containerization microservices I talked about earlier. So even though I ended this on a challenge, I do think it's always important to remember the good stuff we've done. It's very easy, especially as we're working day to day with tasks day to day, to get caught up in the what I haven't done yet. The what we haven't done yet is possible because of all of the cool stuff we've already done and what we've already learned from what we've already developed. So I'm not going to read through all of these. They're up here. And I know we're out of time. So,
Nathan, thank you very, very much. Big applause.